You're listening to Historical Perspectives with Mr. Malt. Learn about life by looking at our history. Teachers, for more information about historical perspectives, search Mr. Malt's Marketplace on Teachers Pay Teachers or at mrmaltmarketplace.com. Happy learning!
Hey everyone, hope you're having a wonderful day. Today we are going to talk about something super interesting. So I came across a story not too long ago on social media about mice. And this man named John Calhoun who wanted to build a utopia for mice. So I want to tell you a little bit about that story. So this pops up in my social media every so often. I don't know if you've seen this before, or if you've heard about this before, but there was this scientist who wanted to build a paradise for mice. He wanted to give unlimited food and unlimited safety. There were no predators involved, no hunger, no struggle. But somehow everything still fell apart. And when I was reading the story online, I really wanted to check in to see if what was factual, what was not. And actually, some of the things that I read online were not so factual. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that today because I think that you'll find this super, super interesting. So what actually happened here? So it was the middle of the 20th century, and like I said, his name was John Calhoun. He was studying animal behaviors. He worked with mice. More specifically, he studied how environmental factors affects behavior of the mice. Calhoun, he believed something super important. He believed that the way that we design the living spaces changes how living things act inside of them. So he decided to test a really big idea with mice. He wanted to know what would happen if animals had everything they needed. There was no danger, no scarcity, no weather, no disease. It was just a comfortable mouse utopia. So picture this. This is really what I found in some of my research. So there's a large enclosed space. There were food dispensers that never ever ran empty. Water fountains that never stopped flowing. The temperature was perfect. There were clean nesting areas. There was plenty of room. For a mouse, it sounds like luxury. Calhoun introduced a small group of healthy mice, and then he just stepped back to observe. At first, everything worked exactly the way that you would think it would. The mice, they explored everything, they nested, they reproduced. The population grew steadily. The space, it felt calm, it was orderly, there were no issues reported. For a while, this really did look like paradise for the mice. But as the population increased, things began to shift a little bit. Not because the mice were starving, not because they ran out of space, but because social patterns, they began to change. So some mice started to dominate shared areas, while others were pushed to the side. The territories were blurred from everything that I read. Roles became unclear in the group of mice, and gradually, behavior started breaking down. The aggression, it was reported that it increased. Some males became super dominant, attacking others repeatedly, and some mice withdrew completely from the group. Females, a lot of them were overwhelmed and stressed, and they began neglecting their young. So the babies were not being taken care of the way they should be. Infant survival dropped. So this was super noticeable by Calhoun that the babies were not surviving. Not because resources were missing, but because the social structure that supported parenting was collapsing. Calhoun called this phenomenon a behavioral sink. It wasn't overcrowding in the physical sense. It was overcrowding in a social sense. There were too many interactions and too few meaningful roles in the group. Calhoun noticed something else too. A small group of mice that stood out. They were clean, their fur was perfect, they had no scars, and they just spent their time grooming. They were eating, they were sleeping, they didn't fight, they didn't mate, they didn't raise young. Calhoun called them the beautiful ones. Not because they were thriving, but because they had opted out. They weren't broken physically. There was nothing wrong with them. They just weren't participating anymore. Over time, births slowed. Then at one point, they just stopped altogether. The population aged. There were no new generations to replace them. Eventually, the entire colony, it just collapsed, not from hunger and not from disease, because like we mentioned, everything was, all of the mice were super healthy when put into this. But the colony collapsed because there was a complete breakdown of social life. Now, here's the part that often, I think, gets misunderstood in all of this. Calhoun didn't conclude that comfort destroys life. He didn't argue that struggle is necessary for survival, and he definitely didn't say that this was the blueprint for human society, so he wasn't connecting this to humans, but what he worried about was something more specific. He worried about environments where individuals, they can't find a meaningful role. Where some are pushed out of participation, where some social systems became rigid, where contribution became impossible for many, that's when behavior deteriorates. So even when physical needs are met, all of this was still happening. Calhoun ran many variations of these experiments for years and years. So it wasn't just one time that he did this. And what he learned was this. Healthy populations don't just need food and safety. They need opportunities to contribute, space for social roles, systems that allow individuals to matter. Without those things, something essential breaks down. So that's what Calhoun was seeing in all of this, right? He was seeing that those mice that originally, out on the streets, they had opportunities to contribute to their small units, taking care of their babies and taking care of their young and finding food, where all of these things, they were no longer happening here, right? So they didn't have a meaningful way to contribute because of the social interactions that were happening. So when this story shows up online as a warning about there's too much comfort or a utopia gone wrong, that's not really the lesson that we're looking at here. The real takeaway is maybe a little bit more human. Living well isn't about surviving; it's about belonging and purpose and having a place where what you do actually matters. I think that's the real story that we can take away from the mouse utopia that Calhoun created. It's a lot more interesting than just that simple story that maybe some of us have heard before. So, yeah, I hope you found that interesting. Super cool story. John Calhoun making that mouse utopia and really finding some really interesting results. So I hope you enjoyed that. And until next time, have a great one.
Thanks for listening to this Historical Perspective. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe. Also, search for Historical Perspectives on Teachers Pay Teachers to learn more about other topics, such as the Golden Gate Bridge, Henry Ford, schools in the early 1900s, and so much more. Happy learning!